So welcome everybody to the September 23rd special committee meeting of the Garbage Recycling Advisory Committee. We are recording this. It will be posted to our website within 7 business days. If you have any questions, you are welcome to raise your hand or submit them through the Q&A, and we have time permitted through the rules for the committee chair to address those. Only the chair may recognize a public attendee, and we have 2 spots on the agenda for comment. And from there, I will hand it back to you, Ken.
Okay, if possible, I am Ken Foote. I'm chair and a public member. And if we can go through the GRAC members, then the staff. Go ahead. So let's go. Beth.
Hi, Beth Burgess Duncan, industry member.
Vinod. You're
muted.
You're muted.
I off muted and new muted back on. Vinod Singh, industry member. How about Ashwin?
And Sue.
Ashwin Nagaraja, public member.
Sue Shade, public member, unincorporated Washington County resident.
Sandra.
Sandra Smith, unincorporated Washington County resident and public member.
Okay.
I'm Tom Eggleston. I'm a HHS Solid Waste and Recycling Division Manager and a non-voting member of the advisory committee.
Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Folsom, HHS staff.
And Aaron.
Hi, Erin Stein, operations supervisor, and I'm the moderator this evening. And Ken, just so you know, we do have some public attendees tonight as well.
Oh, good. Okay. I don't have an agenda in front of me, so.
Solid waste updates. I got just a couple from the program updates. I just wanted to share that we are making progress on the recruitment for the advisory committee. We've closed applications now about a week ago, and we received a total of 11. Is that correct, Kathy? 11 applications, which is great.
Wow.
It's often challenging to get applicants, but we worked with our education outreach team, and they pushed out some information in some newsletters and on Facebook, and we got a great following and a great response. So we're really excited about that. We will be working to do a work session with the Board of Commissioners on October 12th. And at that work session, we'll be recommending 3 appointments, and the board will advise us whether they like those recommended appointments or if they want adjustments to that. And then we plan to go back to the board on October 26th for an action item for the board to appoint 3 new members to the committee. So hopefully we'll have some new members for our November meeting if we have one. And I think there is some question about that because of holidays and timing, but we can take that on when we get there.
These will be public members, all of them?
Yes. Vinod will be our lone industry member at that point in time. So he was just appointed last year, so he's got 3 more years with us. So we'll get to know Vinod really well.
Are industry people precluded from joining because they are, after all, members of the public?
No, I mean, an industry member could apply. It'd be up to the board to appoint them. I don't know if staff would recommend that because it doesn't meet the spirit of our bylaws, but they're not precluded from applying.
Okay. Next.
The only other thing I would add is we have been working on a project and we've been working with Washington County Hauler Association to explore and study more low-income rate models and maybe more equitable ways to charge rates to community members to incorporate things such as income so we can account for some of the challenges folks have maintaining their basic services. We have engaged with Marina and Company, who is our rate consultant on a separate contract to do this work with us. And they've gone through some foundational work and done some research, and they have some, and we're kind of closing on an initial phase of the project and really just kind of understanding the issue. We've invited them to come to the committee meeting on October, so in 3 weeks, and they're going to present their work to the committee that they've done to date and look for some feedback from the committee and hopefully get some involvement from committee members in helping guide this project and this process. We're not sure when the work will wrap up, but we're actually hopeful to see if we can get some ideas and some concepts baked and in place for potentially seeing if we can line things up for the next rate review year that might be available. We think it might be kind of quick, but waiting a whole year after that also is kind of a long time. So we're seeing if we where we can get by the end of the year and into the early next year with rate review. So that'll be a great opportunity for you all to kind of hear about this work and provide any feedback or input and maybe help us identify issues we haven't thought about and kind of help guide that process a little bit more.
So what criteria did you give Marina and Associates for the framework within which they were to work?
Well, Action 14.4 in the regional waste plan regards implementing a low income rate assistance program. So that's kind of the action we're working towards. We have interpreted that a little bit more broad, kind of talk about equity in rates and not just focus on low income, but it's looking more like low income is a barometer that can be used quite easily, all things considered, to kind of identify who qualifies for a separate kind of rate structure or maybe a lower income rate model. So we didn't give them much parameters. We asked them to help us identify what models are out there, what examples exist in the United States, looking at other utilities, looking at garbage services, how it may have been done in the past. We asked them to check in with our community partners and our haulers to talk about what are some of the concerns and what are some of the things we need to consider if we are working through developing a project or a rate model like this. So kind of trying to really build the base and get a base understanding of what the options and what the opportunities are. And now we're kind of, I think, hopefully after we have a conversation with the GRAC, we can shift into the place where we're trying to evaluate alternatives and determine if it's anything's standing out as more feasible than something else, and if something else needs to be taken off the table, those kinds of things.
I have a second question. Is this a case where by lowering somebody's rate, we have to raise somebody else's rate to keep the overall picture the same? Or do the haulers individually expected to take a hit as well?
Well, the intent and the direction we've provided for the framework is that nothing can't pay for itself. So there would be no expectation that a low income rate comes out of the pockets of the Haulers Association members. So I think any model that is implemented has to pay for itself in a way, and that essentially means if some are paying less, then some are paying more. Just like when we're providing any other type of service that benefits other individuals. You think about in a really micro scale, we have the yard, you can get your garbage can picked up from the side of your house at no cost if you qualify as meeting the definition of a person with a disability in the state of Oregon, which you could be a person with a disabled parking placard, for example, qualifies for that definition. So those customers aren't charged for that service. Well, that service still costs money. So in essence, that money is still a cost to the system. And so it, in theory, has an upward pressure on rates. This is a little bit bigger of a discussion, and I'm sure there's many more customers that would be impacted by a low income rate than those that don't need to pay to have their cart picked up on the side of their garage. But that's part of the question, is what percent of the customer base are we trying to we think needs assistance, and how much of upward pressure on the rates would that have for the rest of the customer base if it needs to be paid for through the rates. So that's a big part of the discussion. And Ken, you're absolutely right. Nothing's free. And if somebody is paying a lower rate for a service and it's not meeting the true cost of that service, then it's getting paid for by the system in other means.
And I'll just show a personal bias, and that is I'm always offended when I see somebody sitting at the freeway entrance begging for money, drinking his Starbucks coffee. Somehow the two don't seem compatible to me, but that may be just because I'm too old. The other thing I want to mention, though, is part of the reason we have this discussion, everything is we do not have an economic subclass like countries like Brazil or India have. That go through and sort through the garbage and pick stuff out for recycling and what have you, and live on pennies a day. We are, as a nation, as a group of people, even the worst of us, truly blessed. So anyway, I'll get off my podium and we can get on with the meeting.
Thanks, Ken. That's all the updates I have, and I think the next item is oral communication. That's a 2-minute opportunity at the beginning of the meeting, and there's a reminder that there's also a 5-minute opportunity for public attendees at the end of the meeting.
Right. So if you don't think you're going to like what we're going to say, now is the
Say it
time
now
to
or-
talk. And if you don't like what we said, you get another chance at the end. Do we have anybody raising their hand?
We do have a hand up.
Good.
Aaron, do you want to bring Caleb forward?
Hello, everybody. It's Caleb Weaver with Ridwell. Appreciate the opportunity again to say a few words. And again, we just put in, not sure what the plan is exactly for tonight, but wanted to let you all know that I'm here and available to answer any final questions that you all might have. And again, just reiterate some of the points that have been made previously about how the exemption and, feasibly an exemption with some conditions would enable the county to have oversight and visibility into how the exemption was being used, while still protecting the franchises that the haulers have, while also achieving the goals that the whole region is trying to achieve in waste reduction by enabling people to opt into an additional service, whether provided by us or by the haulers or by somebody else who can do it better, to keep hard to recycle items that are not part of the franchise system out of the landfill. So again, I hope you all will support it and we can move forward with this important service for the residents of unincorporated Washington County. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else, Aaron?
All right,
Okay.
that's it. Into our other item, and that is to continue our discussion about the exemption request, Ken.
Yes. And I'm going to take the prerogative of chair and comment a little bit only, and then more at the end. And we'll ask Vinod to go first and then Sandra. And but we received a letter that was distributed, I assume, to everybody on the committee from somebody in Tigard, Margot Monty in Tigard. And I just want to she's strongly in favor of granting the exemption. But I want to comment that she has a statement in here: not granting Ridwell this exemption will only produce more tonnage for the landfill and slow the change we so desperately need to effect. Not granting them the exemption leaves us at the status quo. It doesn't produce any more tonnage or change anything. It just leaves us exactly where we are now. Whether or not Ridwell provides a beneficial service is not really what the discussion is about today. What we have been charged. Tom, if you could tell us what the charge was, you did it better than I could with my faulty memory.
Yeah, I'm actually going to ask Kathy to kind of maybe take the opportunity to reframe the question that's in front of us. And I would just also like, Ken, maybe a minute to just kind of think about the objective and the goal of this evening's meeting.
Yes, please.
At our last conversation, Vinod, I see you too, and I see your hands up, so we'll get to you. You can keep your hand up if you want, but we had a conversation, and we've met multiple times as a subcommittee. You include Sandra, Ken, and Vinod, and we came together as a full committee 2 weeks ago to kind of see if there was some direction we could be provided to staff to return with an action item to the committee. We really need the committee to give some direction to staff in order for us to prepare an action item for a vote. And what I think the outcome, we need to have a vote to take this conversation to a close. And I feel like we've had a lot of time to work on it. So it's really our responsibility as a committee to take on a vote. I know not everybody is going to be comfortable with the outcome likely, and it's not going to be a unanimous vote, and those are often difficult situations, but I do encourage us to be brave and step up and come together so that we can provide some closure for the process. There's a lot of, we've had this issue for a while, and I think it's our responsibility to really answer the question before us. So I encourage us all to to help us provide some direction. And we've asked Ken to help us get to the end of this conversation and maybe a show of hands on providing direction to staff to come back at the October meeting with an action item that can be voted on. So that's kind of where staff wants to see this meeting go. And I appreciate everybody coming together to get there. And I think we're thinking Ken's gonna give some input from his time in the subcommittee and what his thoughts are. Vinod was on the subcommittee and we want to hear what Vinod's thoughts are, and Sandra also was on the subcommittee. So Kathy, if you could reframe the question a little bit, or Vinod, go ahead.
I just had one, before we move away from that letter, there was one thing that I found a little confusing in it. It's on top of where Ken was, and I don't think this is necessarily true, that if the haulers develop their own contracts for the materials, her understanding is that Bidwell will gladly transfer the collection rights back to them, and that's not what the exemption would do. They would compete, essentially, correct?
Well, the exemption that has been requested is for materials not included in this collection system. So if there was a decision to include materials in the collection system in the future, then those materials would no longer be part of the exemption requested. So batteries is the example that we've used in the past. If batteries are not a program material now, but if they became a program material, they would no longer be part of the exemption requested. So does that make sense?
But it wouldn't be a program material. These materials would be exempted from the system.
What the exemption request is for materials that are not program materials. That doesn't mean we can't change the program materials.
But then it would still be picked up. Let's say, batteries aren't a program material, but the haulers picked them up, or, like in their presentation, they said, hey, we can do the service also if allowed. Then my taking wasn't that Gridwell would then say, well, we're going to stop taking batteries and bulbs and plastic bags. We're just going to do it alongside of you.
If the county created a rate and put battery collection into our rules and created a program that was identified in the administrative rules and showed up in the rate sheet, it becomes a program material. So absent that, in the open market, anything could happen. Any hauler could provide service alongside Ridwell, but if it became a program material, it would not be available for collection outside of the certificate. That's how the exemption request has been made.
And remember, an exemption is not Ridwell specific. It is just an exemption. And so anybody can jump in and has no requirement to show any kind of credentials or do an excellent job or a poor job or anything else. They just are outside the system.
Well, we could, yes, in essence, Ken, but you could put parameters on there. They have to be registered with the state of Oregon. They have to carry insurance required to operate on motor highways. They have to deliver materials to an authorized disposal site. They have to actually recycle what they're recycling. We can do those kinds of things, but you're right. There's not a strong regulatory oversight and a mechanism to manage that. So
we have a structure for that now. Would that be easy? Go ahead, Beth. You have your hand up.
Oh, thank you, Ken. I just wanted to add before we got too far afield that just as some people might be joining us midstream in these conversations and not having followed our many meetings, that the Washington County Haulers Association have all said that and made presentations that they would be willing to collect this under the franchise, but are currently disallowed from doing that until this process is complete. So I just want that to be clarified and on the record. And also, if this is exempt and becomes those materials that are not, as Tom is describing them, a program or collected curbside material, then yes, the haulers would be able to collect those, but that rate would not be regulated. So the haulers could still provide that in an exempt service. And like everyone else, it would not be a regulated rate. So just wanted to add that extra context to the conversation. Thank you.
thanks, Beth.
So
Kathy?
would you like me to
Yeah,
go ahead
please.
and?
Yes, if
frame
you
it?
would, Kathy.
Okay, so the issue to be decided by the committee is whether the practice of collecting certain waste for recycling for compensation should be exempt from the requirement of obtaining a certificate. And that decision is based on an evaluation of whether that practice of collecting those specific wastes is not necessary to the implementation of the county or a regional solid waste management plan.
Okay,
So Vinod, do you want to start? And then
Yes, Vinod, you wanna
Sandra
go
and then
first?
Ken, maybe?
Sure. So I don't really have any canned presentation for you. I was just gonna ramble through what we've been discussing. I'll start with the one that the regional waste plan 12.5 was the one initially that we thought might hang it up a little bit. And based on the letter from Metro, from Luis, that said, yes, our intent was to regulate the unregulated down the road. I think that that's sort of a solid piece that their intent was, because we've sort of been going, well, other people are doing it, and that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at what should be being done if we follow the regional waste plan. And then same with it kind of went to Rosalind's presentation as she went through it, and just who's going to be, and we could talk about, I know we're not talking about what the future or what the potentials are, but the equity lens that our regional waste plan is looking through, living wages for everybody and demographics, and they're looking at collecting more information. I'm assuming that wouldn't be part of it again, unless it's put into that, unless you just take the franchise system and lay it over it, then that's the only way you get these things. And as Ken said, I think it's a good idea, and it's a beneficial service, and that's not the question either. The question is, should it be outside of the regulated system? And I think just my experience, and I get no dispersions on governments, that regulation is increasing, not going further away. And there's a reason, because they want to have more transparency and control, and look, this is what's happening, and this is why it's happening. In my world, we were going completely full blown, they're looking at all kinds of things for us to be regulated on, and that's individual reporting of individual employees, makeup and their wages and everything. So I don't know where it goes in that. And then we talk about the community investment and underserved support that was in there. The franchise fees pay into the system, a large chunk of it. So that would be something that would be exempt too. And again, unless you said you have to pay us X% of everything you do. And then, so sorry, I am kind of hopping around because I'm just working through these things that I jotted down. Another part that I took away from that was, the community can really influence through a complaint-driven system, how the franchise works and how the haulers respond to issues in the community. And I don't know that you wouldn't have that control necessarily over an exempt company, over all exempt companies. Again, I'm not just picking on, we're not picking on Ridwell at all. It's not who they are or what they do. It's just how the system seems to be designed and set up to have protections, And I get it. We're having a conversation today, and you have your exemptions or your lines on the road, and yeah, there's some lane that you use the whole lane in the middle. So I get that there's things that people like, and sometimes things get a little bit lost in there, but you have those in order to really protect that. What else? I think you guys can see where I'm going with this. The shared prosperity is something I noted, and that goes back to that paying, the franchise fee paying into the system, making sure everybody has a similar rate, that it's structured. I think in one of the meetings, it was that one of the comments from Brad, I think it was that if it's not in the rate and the haulers are doing it, they could just charge whatever they want. Well, that's exactly what's happening now, and so there's not any sidebars on that. Let me see, what else do I got? I just, when I listened to the Metro presentation, I just, when you talk about regional service standards and comprehensive collection plans, that 12.5 regulating the unregulated is the intention. And the goal here, one of the goals is to reduce the consumption of materials, not make it easier just to get rid of them and move them around. And that goes against everything that I want, because I want more materials. So that's that's just, but, so I'm trying to look to the goals of the regional waste plan. Let's see, regionally consistent services. I think maybe those are my bullet points. That I think I wrote the same things down the second time I heard it. So when we were meeting in the subcommittee, that was kind of my takeaway, that it's not a ding on what's being offered. It's letting things out of the system that people have worked hard to get back into the system. So that was sort of my takeaway, that I was not for exempting everybody from doing this. And also, there are ways to handle these other recyclables. I know there's a collection event in a couple of weeks at the Columbia Outlet Store that's being put on, and they're collecting all these items and more that people are saying you can't get rid of it unless you use this service. Well, that's just not true. That there's availability out there. And I think it's about every month or 2 months that James is doing a collection event. I know there was just one at Century High. So I don't know how many clamshells people are consuming in their house, how much salad they eat, but there are other options for this if this doesn't work out as an exemption. It's not that, oh, now everything has to go back to the trash. Maybe instead of having somebody bring it to you or come to your house, maybe when you go to the store, you drop it off, or you save it for a month for these collection events. So I don't think it's the end of the world necessarily if this doesn't go, but I know people like convenience, and if they want to put something on their doorstep and have somebody to come get it. But that's not, again, that goes, we just talked about, reduced rates. So that's not, if you can't afford the 15 to, or, between what, $10 and $20, depending on what you're picking up, then you don't get that service. So my takeaway, do we want to make recommendations at this point, or is that?
Yeah, please go ahead, Vinod. I think we know what you recommend, but just recommend it.
Yeah, so I don't see a place for this for an exemption. I think it sort of goes, and I've said it before, I'm not for more regulation, but you already have this regulation in place, so it makes sense to me to abide by it.
Thank you, Vinod.
Sandra?
Okay. Hi, guys. So I've attended every committee meeting and subcommittee meeting on this topic.
Way more than me.
I've read the majority of the regional waste plan, the 3-year work plan, and even parts of Senate Bill 582. I'm just a public member. I'm not an industry expert or anything like that, but I did find some findings. My findings are that I found no findings that would prevent a certificate exemption. However, I found several findings that support this certificate exemption and allow recycling of hard to recycle items. I don't know if you want me to go through them all. I've got about 6 of them from the regional waste plan. If you want me to read them really quickly, I can. Page 13, ways to reduce harmful impacts of product end-of-life management. Improve options for people to reduce their garbage by providing services such as building deconstruction, recycling, and composting for homes and businesses, and foster greater recycling by strengthening markets and collection programs. Page 26. In general, investments in recycling leverage higher economic benefits than investments in disposal. Recycling converts waste materials into valuable raw materials. Page 39. This was community engagement meetings, the result of that. Residents were frustrated with the differences in access to, quality of, and availability of services. Many people wanted to recycle and protect the environment, but had challenges like cost, a lack of bins and space, and frequency of collection. Okay. Page 80, benefits and history of curbside recycling. Recycling saves energy, reduces air and water pollution, reduces greenhouse gases, and conserves natural resources. Curbside collection of recyclables makes recycling convenient. I've also found 2 goals of the regional waste plan that fit. Goal 10.1 on page 77, provide comprehensive collection services and supporting education and assistance for source separated recyclables. And goal 15 on page 90, improve the systems for recovering recyclables, food scraps, and yard debris to make them resilient and resilient to changing markets and evolving community needs. So I found all this from the Regional Waste Plan. But when I actually looked at Senate Bill 582, there was something there that actually caught my attention that I thought I'd better read too. It's a legislative finding that they found regarding our recycling system. It says the Legislative Assembly finds and declares that Oregon's statewide recovery rate, which seeks to preserve public health, safety, and welfare and conserve energy and natural resources, has declined each year between 2013 and 2018, and that Oregon is not on track to meet the statewide waste recovery and generation goals pursuant to the measurement methodology that the Legislative Assembly established in 2015. The way Oregon's residents use and consume materials and products, and the way residents manage them when no longer wanted, has changed significantly in the past 35 years since Oregon's first recycling programs were established. That kind of caught my attention. I mean, codes and rules can be challenged and they can be changed. Sometimes they need to be, especially to keep up with changes in society. They should reflect our best interests of our community, and especially when it benefits the greater good of ourselves and our neighbors. We need to be proactive and progressive in our recycling and waste reduction efforts. So because of all these, that's why I recommend that we do grant a certificate redemption to Ridwell and the haulers for the practice of collecting and recycling or reuse materials that are not included in the county's administrative rules.
Thank you, Sandra.
Okay. I have a concern, not about the benefits of curbside recycling. I think it's a great idea. And I think curbside pickup ought to be implemented. I think it ought to be universal. In fact, I think it ought to be, as quickly as we can arrange it, grouped in with the other things that we ask haulers to recycle, including batteries and crankcase oil. And I think crankcase oil they do pick up, but batteries not. And they ought to pick up batteries because batteries are ubiquitous now, and it's going to get far more so. But that said, an exemption is a blanket, you get to ignore the rules, pass. And I think that's a bad precedent to set. I think it's not the proper way to address this. And in my opinion, since we've been dealing with garbage for about 4,000 years now, it's not urgent in the sense that we really need to do something. It's not like having 5,000 people living under a bridge in Texas. That's urgent. Whether or not garbage gets picked up this year or next year or the year after and becomes part of the whole thing has, like food waste, required a lot of time. And I know a lot of people are impatient with how slowly food waste is getting implemented and picked up. And the same thing will be true of any other recyclable material that is not currently going away all by itself easily. But I think in terms of a well-managed structure, we want to make sure people come in, let us know what they're doing, let us know who their insurance are, meet certain standards, and move forward. I have no objection to a structure in which Ridwell or any other practitioner wants to come in and do, including our haulers. But I think it ought to be through the Health and Human Services provisions of the county government rather than winging it on their own or thumbing their nose at the whole system. And I'm not sure there was an opening to have that happen. Sometimes somebody like Ridwell has to come along and poke us on the side and make us move. But I think having done that, I think we're in a position to not make a finding of or a recommendation for exemption. I do not think this is the proper, I don't think an exemption is the proper vehicle to accomplish this, but I think it's a worthy goal to accomplish. So I would be opposed to an exemption. I would not make a finding to the county that this warrants an exemption, but that I would recommend off as an adjunct to whatever else we say, that the county direct staff to undertake how to have this accomplished and it ought to be for everybody. It shouldn't be just something for the people who have lots of disposable income. We already do too much for people with disposable income, and I'm one of them, but I wasn't always one of them. So I understand how it is when, a $20 bill means you miss a couple of meals. So I think we have an issue, we have a problem, but I don't think exemption is the right vehicle to cure it. So that's my thought.
Thank you, Ken. So we have Sue, Beth, and Ashvin here with us too, that we're not necessarily on the subcommittee. So I don't know if you all want to give some thoughts, or if you want to ask some questions of the subcommittee members, of staff. Ridwell has presented themselves as being here to potentially answer some questions if you have questions for them. So whatever you are comfortable with. Do you guys have any thoughts on how you would like to be involved in the conversation?
I have one question for the subcommittee. The part I really like about Ridwell is the reusable items. I was just curious if that was something that was considered. That kind of seems to be something that's kind of left in the wind here, whether if you don't grant an exemption. So I was just curious what you guys' thoughts on that were.
What reusable items do you mean?
Like books that
Like
were
the
collected
books?
for libraries. I mean, they rotate categories, right? So glasses, things that, like Free Geek, I know you can drop off some stuff, but that kind of category of rotating items that were actually deferring from the landfill by reusing them.
Yeah, I don't know that we discussed it particularly down to that level, but that sort of goes to there are options for these materials. If you want to donate your clothes to reuse, or do you want to, there's events, I see events, book drives and things like that. So, and I think the model that's in Vancouver, they do some of that. They do reuse and things like that. So I don't know, so we didn't go down the road because Tom kept steering us back into not providing solutions and not what's going to happen next. It was more like what happens right now. So I think there's options for many of those items. I see different companies driving on Nextdoor app and things like that. I see groups saying, hey, we're collecting clothes for this group, or hey, we're collecting these items. So I don't think it goes away. It just shifts it to how you handle it a little bit, if that makes sense.
And it was not the committee's charge to make a finding on the value of the service. The question was whether or not it was consistent with the regional waste plan, and whether it was something that should be exempted from our efforts to expand the regional waste plan. And as I said earlier, I don't think the exemption is the right vehicle. I think a lot of the things that what Ridwell does are beneficial and worthwhile. I just don't think they're approaching it with the right structure.
Yeah, but you need findings for that, and I don't hear you guys have any findings. 12.5 is not a true finding. I mean, the definition of it, to regulate collection of solid waste materials by collectors, is so vague and non-specific that, I mean, what kind of regulations? We have no idea. Will it affect this? Maybe, maybe not. Will we even get to 12.5? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, it's not in the 3-year work plan that's going through next year. It might not be in the next 3-year work plan.
It might not.
We need something now. I mean, we have this opportunity now to have the haulers and Ridwell provide the curbside service that people want. I mean, not everybody wants it, not everybody needs it, but it's not a requirement for living, like picking up your garbage. But some people want it. I mean, that those once a month or once every other month collection things, I missed the one. I've been to several of those. I missed the one last month because I wasn't here. I don't know if I'll make it to the outlet store one, which is, I hope I do, because that's just down the street from where I live. But a lot of people just can't make these. I mean, once a month is, I mean, they would prefer to have weekly or more. I mean, I could drive all over town, donating my books to a library, donating clothes to a thrift store, going all the way to Edgelix, where I start from, which I do now. Not every week, but every other month or so. But some people can't, some people won't do that. They would rather just throw it away. And I think that's the problem there. We don't want that.
Did we answer your question?
I think it makes sense. Yeah, so I don't have any other questions. I think, if there's a vote or something. I'm on
Yeah, how
board with
about Beth or Sue? Do you guys have any questions or thoughts or you want to put out?
Go ahead, Sue, if you have thoughts. I feel like I talk too much.
You're still muted, Sue. We can see your mouth moving, but
I think she's saying the floor is yours, Beth.
You go, Beth.
Well, I just to springboard one more option off of that other discussion, and this is just me speaking as a person and not necessarily representing others, but just adding more facts to Ashvin's question. And I completely agree with Ken that we aren't talking about the merit of the service. I think that that's something very good that Ridwell did, is brought that to our attention in our community, and heightened, what some of our members had, or at least one of our members had brought forward, and people didn't think that folks would pay for it. So regulators weren't interested in exploring it further. But in terms of how to further reuse, I think everyone vetted a pretty good variety of options of how that could occur. But just one more, and it's just me speaking, I don't have this kind of service, but perhaps folks that could afford a service at their porch, like we're talking about, if you have a cleaning person, I know it's not unusual to have a basket where you want items taken to a donation center, and your cleaning person will do that for you. So just something I recently learned that I thought, but not something I particularly indulge in. But I guess the point is there's a lot of ways for us to have this. And I think it's important that we bear in mind the regional waste plan, which the county has adopted as their solid waste plan that's been identified as our shared values throughout the metro area. Lots and lots of time went into the creation of that document. And, Sandra, I appreciate you wading through, like you said, the majority of that. But I think there are a lot of areas, as Vinod has said, that Metro and others are looking for more regulation, more assurances that that the recycling and reduction, all of these things are handled in a standardized fashion, accessible to the majority, if not all, persons at affordable rates. And those are some of the reasons why we have the franchise system, and also with all the environmental protections of the kinds of vehicles used and the safety measures. And there's just, I could talk all night about all the the regulations that are in place and why, but I'll stop. Thank you.
I think it's worth mentioning that in any regulated environment, whether it's garbage or medical or taxis or aviation, all of the regulations came about as the result of an impetus of an event or something that caused them to happen. They are not out there just in a vacuum. And our founding fathers didn't have garbage service built into the Constitution or anything, because frankly, it never occurred to them. And it didn't become a problem until you started to have mass urbanization and all these people living in cities, in which case you suddenly had far more garbage than you had place on the back 40 to put it. So, because nobody had a back 40 anymore. And so it just, we're heading towards, as our society becomes more complex and more everything, we're going to have a lot more regulation in every area, and that's just inevitable. And when you get places that have really high densities, they have a lot more regulations on what we here on the West perceive as personal freedoms. And by that, I mean the Western United States, not the West as a political structure. So it's already been a stated goal of the folks at Metro, at least, to bring the unregulated junk haulers into the fold. And how they choose to do it, I think, is still up for grabs. But and I think the same thing is true for porch pickup of stuff. But it ought to be available universally, and I think it ought to come into the bundle of services that they're required to provide, whether they contract it out or whatever. But I think that that's my personal opinion. So anyway, yes, Vinod.
I was going to add, I don't know if it came up earlier, but we talked about the service. Sorry, Tom, I'm going to go a little into the future. It doesn't mean that it can't exist. Like we've talked about, there other people are looking at ways to subcontract it and still offer this. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to go away. It just is going to be part of under the guidance of the system. And we talk again. You hit it on it. We talk about we joke about when you have rules like don't dive in the hot tub, it's because somebody dove in the hot tub. Every rules come from somewhere. So there's a reason for that. That's I just wanted to add that little future glimpse.
Well, I mean, when
Go
these
ahead.
things get regulated down the line, then this can be implemented, but you don't need a certificate. That's my thing is you don't need a certificate to have them regulated. I mean, when they do go to 12.5, then everybody that's involved, like the junk haulers right now, which don't have certificates, and many other groups that collect solid waste, they will have to follow the rules too. I don't see why one has to be exempted over the other. I mean, if you're calling for them to not, because they don't have a certificate, then all junk haulers should have to cease existing too at this point, if you're going to put it that way.
Well, junk hauling is a little bit different. So
Well, it's a little bit different, but it's
the
going to be
ancillary
regulated.
services piece. So there is
But it
yeah.
falls under 12.5 too.
Yeah.
And who knows what else other collectors fall into that.
Sue, I want to make sure you have it. There you go. Look at that hand up. Thank you.
You just knew I couldn't keep my mouth shut. I'll tell you what I'm real concerned about with this process is having material that is not collected through the regulatory system and the curbside recycling picked up at a home for a fee. I mean, I think it's a great program. My concern is confusion. People will be confused and start putting those materials into their curbside because other people are having them picked up. It happens now. So I see it on my street all the time. People just don't understand. They come from different areas. So I'm real concerned about a confusion if we grant the exception and the haulers get on board and start collecting the material too, that everything is just going to go in the curbside bin regardless. And Ridwell has performed well and is doing well because they're requiring people to separate out their materials, I believe, put them in different containers for collection so that it's a clean pickup for the customer and for Ridwell. And I think that's great, but for the haulers or anyone else coming in, I don't see that happening as easily. So that's one concern I have, that everything's just going to become a mess. And I agree, Vinod, with you that, these things can be collected at multiple places throughout the region. There's lots of places you can take the plastic to, the batteries, styrofoam, goes to Agilix over in Tigard, if that's how you say them. So there are outlets to take these materials. And for a lot of people, it won't matter. They're just going to throw the stuff away anyway. They will not make the effort of sorting it, even if the hauler is picking it up curbside. So I'm really torn with it. I listen to you, Ken, and I'm on your side. And then I listen to you, Sandra, and I'm on your side. And so I think where I'm coming, the point that I'm coming to is, in my mind, we're just not ready for this yet. I think there's a lot we have to figure out before we can open the door to bringing Ridwell or anybody like Ridwell into the marketplace. I think we just have a lot to talk about and figure out before we can say it's a go. That's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
I think I'd like to just, and follow on what Sue said, the reason we have essentially universal recycling and MRFs to sort it out was because we discovered that no matter how much we advertised and tried to tell people, they wouldn't source separate for us at all. And so, you know, essentially in an act of desperation, we said, all right, we'll take it all and we'll figure out what to do with it. We'll put in big conveyor belts and make our people pick it out, because the people out in the field won't. And I think we're going to have the same thing if we have it universal.
We kind of did it to ourselves though, Ken. We wanted everyone to make it easier to recycle. So mix it together and we'll get more recycling. It'll be fabulous. And all this stuff will get recycled and we don't have to take anything to the landfill. And we'll build these beautiful conveyor belts and they'll just sort out all the bad stuff. And we created the monster that we are managing, I think. And Vinod, you might disagree with that characterization, but you're probably much more intimately involved in the single streaming and the roll cart process. So
you know, the commingling increased the amount of material. It brought contamination. We were meeting with a consulting company that Metro has hired today, and they were talking about why don't we do more about contamination. We're like, well, we don't know how much more we can do about it. You know, every load that comes in has contamination. So because they're talking about why don't you reject more loads and things like that. And I said it's resistance fatigue. I mean, we can only beat the drum so much. I'll share my diaper graph with you guys one day that we keep in the Portland location. But yeah, I think it made it more difficult, but it made it more prevalent. So there's two sides of it. So it's a good system. I mean, you know, when we look at dual stream systems, and nobody wants to go back to the dual stream system, but the paper's cleaner. You know, the mills tell us that, hey, when we get paper out of here, it's just cleaner. The containers, they aren't, you know, everything, and that goes to Sue's, everything that might be recyclable doesn't deserve to be in the curb. It just doesn't sort out properly. That's the hiccup on that. But if it's picked up separately or in collection events and things like that, it makes it easier. But so, I mean, just go to back. We're not saying that it's not a good idea what's going on. It's just, where does it fit in?
thanks, Vinod. Hey, and so Ken, Ashvin, I know you've had some questions, and I don't know if you had an opportunity to kind of tell us where you're at. Yeah, we're not necessarily putting you on the spot, but I would appreciate if you don't want to take the opportunity, maybe then we do like provide some direction from you, Ken, or get some hand vote for what you want staff to return with in October. So I'd let you talk, Vinod. I mean, Ashvin, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll be brief, and I'd say I align with Sandra on this. I'm interested in change. I see the urgency of it, and I feel like we can change it, see how it goes, and you know, I like the idea of more recycling. So
Thanks, Ashwin.
So looking at the committee as a whole, can we have a show of hands of how many people would at this point recommend to the county that they grant an exemption? And then I'll follow that with how many of you would recommend not granting an exemption or not making a finding that this is something that warrants an exemption. I think that's the wording we have to use. So those who would be in favor of a finding that this warrants an exemption, hands up. Okay, so and those who would favor going back to the county and saying it's not time yet, we don't recommend an exemption, put your hands up, and that would be me and 3, 4. So would you draft something on that basis for the county? And we'll vote on it next time.
Yep, we can do that. We'll come back with an action item October 12th. That will be an action item, and there'll be a formal vote on that at that time.
So-
Beth, go
So
ahead.
can I, just a point of order question?
Sure.
Do we need to do this again? Or can we just call that our vote?
Well, I think we need to have findings, Beth, and I think in order to do that, we need,
I'm
Well,
confused.
I guess you're
because
right.
Auntie had no findings.
Right, no findings are necessary if there was an unfavorable decision, is what Tom
I
said.
think you're right. So I think if somebody wanted to make a, Kathy's looking at her rule books, but we'll talk over her. If somebody wanted to make a motion and there's a second, I think we could, the committee could vote on deciding to not make any findings in favor of Ridwell's exemption request tonight. And if Brad gets mad at me, I will convene us October 12th, and we might go through it again, but I think that is accurate, Beth. Thank you for that. The code does say findings in favor of, so not in favor of. I think that the committee could take a motion and vote now. Kathy, do you?
Yeah, sure. So looking at the actual code, Tom's right. It's based on a finding recommending the granting of the exemption, and then silent on the need for a finding if you aren't recommending the granting of the exemption. So it appears to me in this weird convoluted paragraph that it's one direction only, and that's in favor of, needs a finding.
Yeah, well, based on the vote we had, I don't think we have an in favor of, so
So we need a formal motion and a second and a formal vote if you want to go that route, Ken, or anybody wants to make
a
a
formal
motion.
motion to what?
To not find, to make no findings in favor of the exemption.
Okay,
request.
I move that we as a committee, as the full garbage recycling, whatever GRAC stands for, that we do not find a exemption of any kind is warranted at this point. Do we have a second?
Second. I
Okay.
second.
Okay, all those in favor? Same four, I assume.
Aye.
Okay, opposed, the same two? I assume so. Okay, there you go.
Motion passes 4-2. Okay. Thank you, Ken.
And when you're talking to the county commissioners, I would urge you to say that, yes, that was the finding, but that the committee as a whole endorses the idea and thinks that the county should move expeditiously to have a mechanism to bring a service like Ridwell, or even Ridwell specifically, into the fold, regulated the way we want it regulated with the right kinds of reporting, and move forward. I'm not wanting to kill the service. I'm wanting to kill the procedure.
And if you have specific thoughts like that, Ken, I think we can take note of that. We have the recording, we can listen to it, but I would also, anybody, I would encourage, if you want to send us an email and put some thoughts in writing that you would like us to communicate up to leadership, we can incorporate that into an update when we get to that.
Okay, thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. So that's the end of that agenda item, I guess. Kathy, go ahead.
I just want to remind, in case anyone wants to talk after.
Yes, I was going to move us into the second comment period. If you're ready to go there, Ken.
I am.
I see a hand up. Caleb. 5 minutes. Aaron, can you get the time? Thanks. Thank you, Caleb.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Obviously, we're fairly disappointed in that result. I just wanted to clarify a few things. Again, we are not advocating for a blanket exemption. We are not advocating that there's no oversight to this work, or that the concerns that some of you have been raising are not somehow addressed. Our preference was to try to move this through the exemption process, but we will 100% look forward to working with Tom and the county, other county staff to figure out what an appropriate regulatory approach is. Again, ensuring that the materials are handled appropriately, that there's oversight, that there's vision to meet the county goals is absolutely appropriate. And I think, as others have said, there's nothing to prevent changing the rules in the future. That's the whole point. The world is changing. I think we know a lot more about the impact of waste and the waste that we are creating as a society is having on the environment. We do believe there is some urgency. We respect that these issues have existed for a long time, but I think we're seeing very clearly today that there is urgency to try to do something. And our service is not collecting a lot of materials, but it is trying to enable people to do their small part. And we know that when people do their small part, they're able to make a big difference. And so, again, contamination is a huge issue. We understand that. We help keep contamination out of the curbside bins by keeping plastic film. We help educate people onto what can go into curbside bins and what cannot. So we're all working toward the same goal. And I think it's time to allow some new ideas and some new entrants in here to help work together. We're not looking for a special pass, but there's certainly ways to enable new services like ours to provide, an optional opportunity for people who want to do their part while still meeting the county's goals. And we look forward to, hopefully as expeditiously as possible, getting there so that we can meet the public demand. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Caleb.
Any other hands raised?
I see no other hands raised.
Okay, well, let's call it a night. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, everybody. So the next meeting will still be October. We're not totally off the hook. Sue, I'm sorry. We'll be able to slow down now. I think that this issue has been settled. But I would like to ask the committee to hear from Marina and co about the low income rate project and model and get any feedback and input from the committee so we can take that and incorporate it into the work going forward.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you all. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody, for attending. Just as a reminder, this session was recorded and it will be posted to the Solid Waste and Recycling website within 7 days. Thank you.